Let's take a look at the worst individual performances from every Champions League final since 2004. 2004, Fernando Morientes. Now don't get me wrong, Fernando Morientes was unbelievable during his loan spell at Monaco. Why else do you think Liverpool forked out for him the next season? Just a shame he could barely tie his laces, never mind scored a goal at Anfield. The Liverpool Morientes was in full flow during this Champions League final, barely getting a sniff as Jose Mourinho's Porto ran out 3-0 winners. He'd return to the Champions League final the next season, only to sit in the crowd alongside Neil Mellor. 2005, Andrei Shevchenko. Speaking of that game, AC Milan 3, Liverpool 3, arguably the greatest Champions League final of all time. There were world-class performances on show from both sides, whether it was Kaka carving through the Reds' defence like they were a block of Swiss cheese, Steven Gerrard dragging his club by the scruff of the neck, or Jimmy Traore managing to go 20 minutes without kicking the ball in his own goddamn net. Honestly, Traore in the Champions League final is like a homeless man attending the Oscars. Although, to be fair, Shevchenko was a world-class striker but did not cover himself in glory that night, scoring a correctly disallowed offside goal, missing an absolute sitter against Jersey Dudek before chipping the most important penalty of his life straight into the Pole's arms. 2 years ago, Shevchenko was the Champions League final hero. This year, he probably spent 3 weeks crying to a bowl of pasta. 2006, Jens Lehmann. Jens Lehmann was a top keeper but was about as unpredictable as a hyperactive toddler. His penalty save against Villarreal had gotten Arsenal to the final, but just like your man in that sex tape, he'd only last 20 minutes in Paris. It was 0-0, he drags down Samuel Eto'o, gets sent off, which meant Robert Perez's last ever game for Arsenal, in his homeland as well, was cut short after 20 minutes. Good job, Jens. 2007, Budwin Zenden. I'll be honest, I'd forgotten this fella even existed. Where has he been hiding? Probably in the same hole in the ground he was during the 2007 Champions League final in Athens. Rafa Benitez's trick of chucking a bunch of bang average players onto the park and relying on tactics and pure courage to overcome the might of AC Milan might have worked in 2005. It didn't 2 years later, with Zenden understandably seeing very little of the ball in midfield. 2008, Didier Drogba. I know, saying that Didier Drogba was the worst player on the pitch in a cup final is almost sacrilege, but it's kind of true. Yes, the Ivorian was always the big man for the big occasion, but he just didn't really do much in Moscow against Manchester United, apart from getting sent off 4 minutes from the end of extra time for slapping Nemanja Vidic in the face. Lad, if you want to go around hitting people with all the force of a frail old woman, do it in your own time, but because of this, he wasn't on the pitch to take a penalty in the shootout, meaning that the fate of Chelsea's European history was left to a centre half seemingly allergic to balance that night. 2009, Anderson. Well, what did you expect? Putting Anderson up against the midfield of Xavi, Busquets and Iniesta, it's no wonder he barely got a kick at the ball. Most midfielders in Europe would have struggled against that holy trinity, never mind some fat lad from Brazil who looks as though he spent every night looking at barbecues in the West Manchester region. Anderson was blowing out of his arse after 10 minutes. The poor man looked as though he was going to collapse after 90, chasing shadows around like a dog in the park. 2010, Martin DeMichelis. We know Martin DeMichelis was prone to the odd error, but he still played for some massive clubs. It was a 2010 Champions League final for Bayern Munich against Inter Milan in a battle of the future Man United managers, a far cry from Everton versus FC Mold, and DeMichelis lost Diego Milito for the first goal and just looked unsettled all evening. 2011, Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick has said he was depressed for years after Manchester United's first loss to Barcelona in the 2009 Champions League final. I can only imagine what the poor man was thinking after the rematch 2 years later. Once again, he was a total passenger up against an unstoppable World Cup winning force of a midfield. 2012, Mario Gomez. It's very simple. If Mario Gomez had played normally and not been seemingly possessed by the ghost of Yaya Sanogo, Bayern Munich would have won the 2012 Champions League final at a canter. But no, Chelsea upset the odds and lifted the trophy in Bayern's own stadium, which is basically the equivalent of taking a shit on the floor of someone's house. Gomez missed a host of chances and looked off the pace all night. Had Robert Lewandowski beat Bayern then, Chelsea would have been humiliated, and Robert Di Matteo would have spent the summer down the local job centre. 2013, Jerome Boateng. It's rare for a lad on the winning team to appear in one of these, but I have to include Jerome Boateng. Ran ragged by the likes of Marco Reus, this was more like the Boateng of Man City, not the one who'd go on to win pretty much everything in football. 2014, Thibaut Courtois. Yep, Atletico versus Real Madrid. Thibaut Courtois against the club he'd end up signing for in the future. To be fair, Courtois didn't have a terrible game, he actually made some decent saves, but at the end of the day, if you concede forward in a Champions League final, it's not being your best day as a goalkeeper. 2015, Patrice Evra. Juventus versus Barcelona. Luis Suarez must have thought he was coming face to face with his demons. He was playing against a backline with two of the players having had their issues with him in the past, where there was allegations of racism or simply treating their shoulder as a piece of steak. Suarez came out the winner though, scoring a 3-1 win with Patrice Evra enjoying a torrid time against Neymar. 2016, Fernando Torres. Another Real Atletico final, another Real win, this time on penalties, and Fernando Torres was pretty anonymous. Torres of 6 years earlier would have had that Madrid backline for breakfast. Not this one, this beaten up old shell of a man making absolutely no impact on the match. 2017 2017, Paulo Dybala. Juventus returned to the final next year and were once again slapped around the place by a Spanish giant, losing 4-1 to Real Madrid with Paulo Dybala barely even touching the goddamn ball. 2018, Loris Karius. The worst, the absolute creme de la creme of horrifying Champions League performances. So bad that he tried to scream to the world that it was the fault of a concussion. Yeah, lad, considering your performances in Turkey, I'm just gonna put it down to you being a bad old keeper. You can't afford to make mistakes against Real Madrid. He made 2, inexplicably rolling the ball into Karim Benzema's boot, ending up in the net for the most hilariously terrible Champions League final goal of all time. Then he conceded a bicycle kick from Gareth Bale. Fair enough, you can't do much about that. But you certainly can do something about the Welshman's next goal, a pot shot from 25 yards that should have been clawed to safety, not rebounding off your gloves into the back of the goddamn net. I'm guessing the likes of Jordan Henderson wanted to murder him in his sleep.